Every woman feared this room, not because of its size or its darkness or even the smell of blood that lingered in the air long after it had been scrubbed away. They feared it because once you crossed its threshold, you were no longer certain you'd come out alive. This was the place where life began in Tudor England, and far too often where it ended. The screaming has been going on for 14 hours. Not steady, not constant. No one can scream without breath, but in waves, each one tearing what's left of your voice. Between the cries, there's a strange silence. You can hear the fire popping in the hearth. You can hear the shifting of the women in the shadows. You can hear your own heartbeat in your skull. The midwife's hands are inside you again. They're hard, rough from a lifetime of work. The skin cracked like old leather. She's been working for so long her shoulders are trembling. The smell of sweat drips from her arms. But underneath it, you smell something sharper. Blood. It's under her fingernails, not fresh, not yours. Yesterday's. From the woman who died on this very bed. The one whose baby came halfway out and refused to come the rest of the way. They cut that baby apart while it was still alive. They pulled it out in pieces, and she was awake for it all. Your vision is starting to blur. The edges of the room grow darker, not because the light is fading, but because the air itself feels heavier. The smell is everywhere now. Iron, damp straw, something rotten under it all. You will never forget it. They say in Tudor England, 1 in 3 women die giving birth. Not in their lifetime, in childbirth. 1 in 3. Look around any birthing chamber with 3 expectant mothers. 1 is already dead. She just hasn't stopped breathing yet. The windows here are sealed with boards and nailed shut. Every gap is stuffed with cloth and wax. Fresh air, they say, carries evil spirits. The room has been turned into a box, airtight, still. Thick curtains hang like funeral shrouds, blocking the day. The air is so still you can almost feel it pressing on your skin. The fire roars in the grate, always roaring. They believe heat drives out bad humours and makes the womb open. The temperature in here is sweltering. You're drenched in sweat, gown plastered to your skin, hair sticking to your cheeks. Your lips are cracked and bleeding. Your tongue feels like parchment. Still they add more logs. Your throat aches. Every time you try to speak, it's nothing but a croak. Not that anyone listens now. They've stopped noticing you. You're not the focus anymore. You're just the battlefield. The discussion has shifted to the war itself. They're arguing in low voices whether to send for the barber surgeon. And that's when the real fear takes hold. Everyone knows about the hooks. They're not a secret. Children hear about them before they even understand where babies come from. Hooks for when the baby can't be born whole. Hooks for when it must be born in pieces. You've heard the stories. Sarah from the village, 4 days in labour before they took her son out in 3 separate pulls. The countess, whose baby's arm came first, sawed off at the shoulder. Your own sister, who bled out last winter while everyone stood around praying. The midwife pulls her hands from your body. They're red to the elbows. She doesn't meet your eyes, just gives the smallest shake of her head. Someone whispers about sending for the priest, not for blessing, for last rites. The others avoid your gaze. They don't want to see the panic building in your face. They've seen it before, the moment a woman realises she isn't coming out alive. What the priest doesn't know is that you are about to become a number, a statistic so brutal, so relentless, that history itself has done everything it can to bury it. They call it the birthing chamber, but that's too clean a word for it. The reality is more like a slaughterhouse dressed in tapestries. The fire isn't just for warmth. They believe heat will make your body open faster. Too cold, and the womb might close up, trapping the baby. Too hot and, well, they don't think there's such a thing as too hot. The curtains aren't just decoration. They're nailed to the frames. Light and fresh air are dangerous, they say. They let in spirits. They unbalance humours. They make you sick. The air here is thick. It smells like damp wool, old straw, and the metallic tang of blood. There's a sweetness too, the cloying smell of pus from infected wounds, lingering from the last birth. You aren't the first woman to labour in this room. You won't be the last. The floor is covered in straw, but not fresh, not even clean. It's been down for weeks, maybe months. It's soaked through with everything that leaves the body during childbirth: blood, urine, amniotic fluid, feces. And because no one understands infection, no one sees a reason to change it. They just add more straw on top. If you are noble, you might get sheets. If you're very lucky, those sheets will already be stained from a previous birth. That's not filth to them, it's luck. Washing would wash away the blessing. The noise in here is constant. Women moaning, crying, sometimes screaming, sometimes whispering prayers. The pop and hiss of the fire. The rustle of skirts as women come and go. But in the moments between contractions, there's a strange clarity. You hear the smallest sounds, the click of the midwife's nails on the basin, the slow creak of the stool as she shifts her weight, the muffled cough of someone in the corner. These are the sounds you will remember when the screaming stops. The danger isn't just the birth, it's the room itself. In a place like this, bacteria breed faster than gossip. Every woman who comes in brings whatever she's carrying: fevers, infections, death. Every woman who leaves a little of herself behind. There is no understanding of contagion, no washing of hands, no boiling of instruments. The midwife's cloths, the bedding, the straw, all are reused over and over, layered with the history of the dead. This isn't just a place of birth, it's a place of accumulation. Every disease that's passed through is still here, waiting. You know the odds. Everyone does. You've seen women vanish after birth, their names mentioned once at market, then gone. You've seen children raised by wet nurses because their mothers are buried in unmarked graves. And yet, you lie here. You can't leave. You can't refuse. This is where you're meant to be, because you're a woman, and this is your purpose. No one calls it courage. No one calls it war. But the women in this room know better. The fire cracks. The midwife leans close. She whispers that the surgeon is on his way. And in that moment, the blood room closes in around you. The windows are shut. The curtains are drawn. The fire is roaring. And the hooks are coming. The truth is, your death sentence isn't written in the blood room. It's signed on your wedding day. In Tudor England, marriage isn't romance. It's contract, currency, survival. And for women, it's a one-way march toward the birthing chamber. The moment you speak your vows, your body belongs to your husband, and your life belongs to your womb. There is no birth control here. None that works reliably. No waiting until you're ready. From the first night, your body's expected to produce heirs, workers, alliances, and it will keep producing until it can't, or until it kills you. Most girls are married before they turn 18. 16 is average, 14 is common, 12 isn't rare. The law allows it, the church blesses it, and society demands it. Consummation isn't optional. A marriage without sex isn't considered a marriage at all. It can be annulled. Which means that a girl barely past her first bleeding will be expected to lie still, while a grown man takes what the law says is his right. Imagine a 13-year-old, hips still narrow, bones still growing, lying on a marriage bed in a candlelit chamber. The man beside her might be twice her age or more. She's never been kissed, never seen a man naked, never been told what to expect, except whispered warnings from women too afraid to speak plainly. And from that first night, the clock starts ticking toward her first pregnancy. A young girl's pelvis isn't fully formed. The bones are narrow, the birth canal small. But in Tudor England, this doesn't matter. What matters is producing children, and the sooner, the better. When a child tries to give birth to another child, disaster follows. The baby's head can't pass through. Labour stalls. The contractions keep coming, harder and harder, tearing flesh and exhausting the mother until she's too weak to cry out. In the modern world, a C-section would save them both. In Tudor England, there's no such miracle. Not for the living, anyway. The only surgical births are performed on dead or dying women to save the baby, and most of those attempts fail. Instead, the girl labours for days. She rips apart from the inside. She bleeds into the straw. She drifts in and out of consciousness. If she dies, the midwife might turn to the hooks. If she lives, she's changed forever. Survival is not the end of suffering. Tearing during birth is almost inevitable, especially for a young girl. Sometimes the tear runs all the way from front to back, leaving a single wound where there were once separate passages. The pain is constant. Sitting, standing, walking, all agony. The wound may never heal completely, especially without rest or proper care. But rest is rare. 6 weeks is the traditional lying-in period, but that's for the wealthy. For a peasant girl, healing time is whatever she can steal before she's back in the fields or at the loom. And then just when she can walk without bleeding, the husband returns to her bed. There is no choice in the matter. There is no concept of marital rape. A husband has rights to his wife's body. Pregnancy comes again, often before the scars have even begun to close. Even queens aren't spared. Catherine of Aragon, Henry VIII's first wife, endured this cycle 6 times. She gave birth to one living daughter, Mary, and buried 5 other children. Each pregnancy weakened her further. Some ended in stillbirth, others in infants who died within days. Yet each loss was counted as her failure, not her husband's. The court whispered about her body being cursed, as though she had chosen to bury her children. Her reward for years of risk, pain and grief: divorce. Henry cast her aside for failing to give him a son, despite the fact that he was likely carrying syphilis, a disease known to cause miscarriages and stillbirths. If this was the fate of a queen, surrounded by attendants, with the best food and the most experienced midwives, imagine the fate of the women who laboured in dirt-floored cottages. For Tudor women, marriage is not protection, it is exposure. Exposure to pregnancy after pregnancy, with no escape except death or menopause. And menopause is a distant, unlikely dream when the average life expectancy for a woman hovers around 35. A wife is expected to bear as many children as her body will allow. 10, 12, even 15 pregnancies are not unusual. Each one carries the same risk of death. Each one leaves her weaker than before. This is the unspoken truth of the marriage vows. The moment you become a wife, you also become a patient in waiting. Your wedding bed is your sick bed. Your sick bed is your deathbed. Marriage contracts often specify the expectation of children, not just for royalty, but for gentry and merchants too. Producing heirs secures property lines, inheritance, and alliances. A barren wife is grounds for annulment, which means she can be discarded and replaced. Women are well aware of this. Every pregnancy is a gamble, but refusing pregnancy is not an option. Even the church reinforces it. Childbirth is a woman's God-given duty, a divine sentence passed down from Eve. It's hard to calculate exact mortality rates, but estimates from parish records and court documents suggest that between 2% and 5% of women died with each birth. Multiply that by the number of pregnancies and the lifetime risk climbs to terrifying levels, often higher than 25%. And those are just the deaths. Many more women are left maimed, with fistulas, chronic pain, or permanent disability. These women fade from records, their suffering too ordinary to note. Older women rarely warn younger ones of the dangers, not because they want to keep secrets, but because they know there is no choice. What good would it do to terrify a girl before her wedding night? Better to let her hope, better to let her believe she will be one of the lucky ones. So the truth is passed only in fragments, a sigh over tea, a hand squeezed at the market, a quiet warning in the days before the wedding. The rest is learned in the dark, in the moments between contractions, when the truth can no longer be avoided. The distance between the marriage bed and the blood room is measured in months, not years. A new bride may find herself in labour before the first snow of her marriage. And so the cycle continues. The girl who married at 14 becomes a mother or a corpse at 15. If she survives, she will likely be pregnant again, before she turns 16. By the time she is 20, she may have buried more children than she has living. This is the hidden contract beneath the vows, that every kiss on the wedding day is also a farewell. You've just stepped out of the marriage bed. You're swollen with life you did not choose. And now, the doors of the birthing chamber are opening. 6 weeks before your due date, they lock you away. They call it confinement. It sounds safe, protective, a time for rest. But for most Tudor women, it is the start of the slow march toward the bloodroom. You are moved into a chamber prepared just for birth, and by prepared, they mean sealed. The windows are nailed shut, not to keep out cold, but to keep out air. Fresh air is dangerous, they say. It carries evil spirits. It unsettles the humours. So the room is made as airtight as possible. Every crack is stuffed with rags or plastered over. Thick curtains hang heavy over the windows. The light is dim, even at midday. Shadows creep in the corners where the firelight doesn't reach. The air is already stale, but it will grow worse. Once you enter, you don't leave. For 6 weeks, sometimes longer, you're cut off from the outside. No sunlight, no breeze, no sight of the changing sky. The world becomes this single, airless room. You're not allowed to wash with cold water. It might shock the body. You're discouraged from moving too much. You must save your strength for labour. You're encouraged to stay warm at all times, as warmth will ripen the child inside you. The fire must be kept burning day and night, no matter the season. In the depths of summer, the heat is unbearable. Sweat runs down your back and pools under your gown. You can't drink enough to quench your thirst. You dream of cool water, of wind on your face, but there is none. At first the smell is just wood smoke from the hearth and the faint musk of the straw on the floor. But with each day of confinement, it changes. Your own body adds to it, the dampness of sweat that can't be washed away, the sourness of stale linen never aired out. Visitors come and go, bringing the smell of the street, the market, the animals in the yard. And then there are the other women, because you're rarely alone here. The birthing chamber is rarely the private sanctuary you might imagine. In noble households, it is common to fill the room with gossips, other women from the family, close friends, important witnesses. Some are there to help, some are there to watch. In poorer homes, the space might be shared with other labouring women, each lying on her own pallet of straw. The air is filled with moans, gasps, and muttered prayers. The straw itself is old, replaced only when absolutely necessary. It is already stained from births before yours, and they will tell you that is a good thing, that it is lucky to lie where another woman delivered safely. If you are unlucky, you will be placed on the straw of someone who died here. They will not tell you this. The darkness is supposed to protect you. Too much light during labour, they say, will strain the eyes, weaken the mother, and disturb the child. In truth, the darkness only hides what is happening. The infections, the wounds, the mess. The heat is supposed to make the womb open faster. The hotter the room, the quicker the child will come. That is the belief. The reality is dehydration, weakness, and an environment where infection thrives. Midwives and gossips alike sweat through their clothes, their skin shining in the firelight. The smell of bodies grows thicker. The air is so heavy it feels like a weight pressing down on your chest. Once labour starts, you cannot leave the chamber until the child is born, dead or alive. It doesn't matter how long it takes. Labour of 3 days is not unusual. Some women labour for a week, all of it in the same bed, the same air, the same heat. There are no breaks, no walks in the fresh air to clear your head. There is only the slow, grinding pain and the endless sound of the fire. For royal and noble women, privacy is even less possible. In the upper classes, childbirth is a public event. The more important the mother, the more witnesses are required to confirm the legitimacy of the child. Imagine lying there, legs apart, screaming, while 24 people stand and watch. Courtiers, noble women, sometimes men, all gathered to witness that the baby is truly yours. You are not a mother in that moment. You are a vessel on display. For peasants, the witnesses are fewer, but no less intrusive. Neighbours crowd in, partly to help, partly because births are one of the few public spectacles open to women. Everyone will have an opinion on how you performed, whether you cried too much, too little, or at the wrong times. The birthing chamber is both a prison and a confessional. What happens here will not be spoken of outside, at least not honestly. If things go wrong, the details will be softened or erased. If you die, the story will be that you passed peacefully. If the child dies, the cause will be attributed to fate, sin, or bad luck, not to the filth, the heat, or the hands that caught it. Those who survive rarely speak of the chamber in detail, not because they forget, but because they cannot bear to relive it. In the last days before labour, you become hyper-aware of your own body. Every cramp, every ache feels like the beginning. The women around you tell you to rest, but rest is impossible. The heat, the smell, the pressure, all of it weighs on you. You count the days until you can leave, but you know that leaving will only happen through pain. The bedding, if you have it, is never washed between births. They believe it holds the luck of the last delivery. The stains are not cleaned away. They are kept, treasured even, as proof of past success. Poor women may not have sheets at all. They labour directly on the straw. The straw will absorb everything: blood, sweat, amniotic fluid, feces, vomit, and remain in place for the next woman. All of these practices, the heat, the darkness, the confinement, are rooted in superstition and theory, not evidence. The Tudor understanding of medicine is based on balancing the four humours: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Heat is thought to encourage the right balance. Darkness is believed to keep the mother calm and focused inward. Confinement is meant to protect against evil spirits. In reality, every one of these rules makes the process more dangerous. The heat breeds bacteria. The darkness hides infection. The confinement traps you in with the very things that can kill you. When the first real contractions hit, the chamber shifts. The gossiping stops. The midwife comes closer. The other women stand ready. The fire crackles louder. Or maybe you just notice it more. You are no longer a woman in a room. You are the centre of it, the reason for its existence. And the chamber, with its heat and darkness, closes around you like the jaws of a trap. From here, there is no going back. The next time you see the outside world, you will be a mother, or a body. The woman who holds your life in her hands isn't a doctor. She's not trained in anatomy. She has never studied a single medical text. She doesn't know how to read. What she does have is experience, not formal training, not a license, but years spent standing at bedsides and squatting in straw. She has seen hundreds of births. She has held dying women and stillborn babies. She has learned through repetition what brings a child into the world and what fails. But she has also learned to work quickly, to move on, because there is always another birth waiting, another body, another pair of eyes looking up at her in desperation. She doesn't know what germs are. No one does. The idea that something invisible could carry death from one woman to the next is unthinkable. She will go from one delivery to another without washing her hands. She will handle a dead baby in the morning, a dying woman at noon, and by evening she will have her arms inside another labouring mother. And you will not think to question it. You will not see danger in her touch. You will see only the hands you must trust to bring your child into the world. Some midwives keep their nails long. They say it's for speed, for efficiency. A long nail can pierce the amniotic sac in a moment. It can scrape away pieces of stubborn placenta. It can hook out clots of blood too large to pass naturally. These nails are never cleaned. They are sharpened on stones, filed smooth for comfort. Comfort for the midwife, not for you. Those nails carry the memory of every birth they've touched, and they will carry those memories into you. There is no gentle way to describe what comes next. When the midwife checks you, she will shove her entire hand inside to feel for dilation. There is no oil, no balm, no warm water. There is only your own blood as lubrication. She will do this again and again, sometimes every hour, sometimes every half hour. Each examination stretches you a little further, tears you a little more. The pain is sharp, but the risk is worse. Every time she does this, she drives whatever lives under her fingernails deeper into your body. Midwives work on instinct. They feel the position of the baby, the width of the opening, the strength of the contractions. They make their calls quickly. If she decides the baby is coming too slowly, she may try to turn it inside you. Her hands will twist and push, gripping limbs you can't see, shifting the shape of your pain. If she decides the baby isn't coming at all, the air in the room changes. The gossips go quiet. Someone slips out into the night. When she calls for him, you know the situation is bad. The midwife's hands can do many things, but they cannot cut. And for the worst cases, cutting is the only way forward. The barber surgeon will arrive with his bag of iron and wood. He will smell of smoke, sweat, and something metallic. He will not comfort you. He will not explain. He will simply take over. The midwife steps back then, wiping her hands on a cloth that has already been used too many times. She has done what she can. Now it is in his hands. The tragedy is this. Sometimes the midwife kills you without meaning to. Sometimes she saves you when the surgeon would have ended your life. The choice between them is no choice at all, only a shift from one kind of risk to another. You might trust her because she is a woman, because she has held you through the night, because she has whispered prayers in your ear, but her hands carry death just as surely as his hooks do. She has seen so much that she no longer reacts to it. She has seen mothers die mid-scream. She has seen babies born without breath, without limbs, without faces. She has seen the joy of a healthy cry and the silence that follows failure. Her eyes will not widen when she sees blood pooling under you. Her voice will not shake when she tells someone to fetch the priest. She has stood in too many rooms where the outcome was already decided. And you will search her face for hope. If you don't find it, you'll know what's coming next. The midwife steps back. Her hands glisten in the firelight. The nails are dark. The cloth she wipes them on is red and stiff. She meets your eyes for the briefest moment, then looks away. She has sent for him. The man with the hooks. There's a moment in every impossible labour when the air in the room changes. You feel it before you hear the words. The midwife's hands pause. The other women stop their whispering. A single glance passes between them, and then someone quietly slips out the door. They're going to fetch him. The barber surgeon. He is not a doctor, not in the way we think of the word. He has no university training, no degree in medicine. His skills were learned on the battlefield, in the marketplace, in the back room of a tavern. He cuts hair, he pulls teeth, he lances boils and drains abscesses. He bleeds people for fevers. And sometimes, when called, he delivers babies, but only when the midwife cannot. You hear him before you see him. The clink of metal in a leather bag. The heavy tread of boots on the floorboards. The faint smell of smoke, sweat, and old iron. When he steps into the chamber, the heat of the fire glints off the metal hooks that hang from his bag, like butcher's tools. These hooks are not delicate. They are forged from iron, curved to grip, thick enough to withstand force. The handles are wood, worn smooth by years of use. He has other tools too, long, blunt scissors, knives with narrow, sharp points, and wrapped in a cloth at the bottom of the bag, the cranioclast, two heavy, curved jaws designed to crush bone. These are not instruments of healing. They are weapons, and they will be used on the child you have carried for 9 months. In Tudor England, when a baby cannot be delivered naturally, there is no C-section for a living mother. The only surgical opening of the womb is performed after death, to try and save the child if there is time, or to baptize it before it dies. If the baby is stuck inside you and you're still alive, there is only one solution: remove it in pieces. This is called a destructive delivery. The name is accurate. The surgeon works by touch alone. He cannot see what he is doing. The darkness of the chamber and the position of the baby make that impossible. His hands go inside you, blindly searching for something to grip. The eye socket is a common choice, easy to hook. Once the iron slips in and catches, he pulls, hard. If the head comes whole, you will feel the skull tear through the birth canal. If it doesn't, he will pull again and again, bringing out fragments of bone and hair and brain. If the head is too large to pass, he will use the cranioclast. The jaws slide inside, clamp around the skull and crush it. You will hear the crack before you feel the collapse. Then the pieces come out, one by one. Sometimes the head passes, but the shoulders are stuck. In that case, he will reach in with a knife and saw through the joint. You will feel the blade cutting through skin, muscle and bone. The tiny arm will emerge perfect and intact, except it is no longer attached. There is no anesthesia, no numbing, no relief. Every cut, every pull, every fracture is felt in full. Some women pass out from the pain. Others remain conscious through every second, their screams filling the chamber. The fire pops in the grate. The midwife mutters prayers. The surgeon grunts with effort. Even if the surgeon succeeds in removing the baby, survival is far from certain. The tearing and cutting can rupture the womb, sever major blood vessels, or cause infection within hours. Many women bleed to death on the bed. Others die days later from fever. If you live, you may never carry another child. Scar tissue can prevent the womb from stretching again. And in a world where a woman's value is tied to her ability to bear children, that is its own kind of death. The surgeon does not work for free. He charges by the procedure. Removing a dead baby is one fee. Cutting it into pieces costs more. Each hook insertion, each cut, each separate limb, all are billable. If your family cannot pay, he may walk away mid-procedure. Women have died with the hook still inside them because the money ran out. In the village, they will tell the story for years. They will remember the screams, the smell, the way the surgeon's hands moved without hesitation. If you survive, you will live with the memory, not just of the pain, but of the sounds. The metallic scrape of the hook against bone, the wet pop of a joint coming apart, the hiss of breath through clenched teeth, and you will remember the weight of the silence afterward, when everyone is too afraid to speak. If the child is dead before the surgeon begins, there is no pretense of saving it. If it is alive, it will not be for long. Sometimes the baby is pulled out missing parts, a head without a body, or a torso without limbs. Sometimes it emerges whole but broken inside, its skull crushed, its chest caved in. If it shows any sign of life, the midwife may attempt a baptism before it dies. In some cases, the priest is summoned to stand by the bed, ready to bless the child in its final moments. When his work is done, the surgeon packs his tools. He wipes them with a rag, the same rag he used for the last woman, and the one before her. There is no boiling water, no cleaning. The iron goes back into the bag, ready for the next birth. He will leave without ceremony. He will be paid before he goes. He will not stay to see if you live. The other women in the chamber have seen it before. They will not speak of it outside. They will help clean you as best they can. They will dispose of the remains discreetly, sometimes burying them separately, sometimes not at all. You will not be comforted. You will be told to rest, and you will know that rest is only a pause until the next pregnancy begins. The hooks are gone now, but the echo of them remains. You will carry it for the rest of your life. In Tudor England, the crown may protect you from poverty, hunger, and the noose. It will not protect you from childbirth. Here the womb is the great equalizer. It doesn't care about your bloodline. It doesn't care about your jewels, your title, your armies. A queen can die on the birthing bed just as quickly as a milkmaid. and in some ways her suffering is worse. Jane Seymour gave Henry VIII the one thing he wanted most, a living son. Edward was born on October 12th, 1537, after what was described in court records as a fair and easy delivery. But easy in Tudor terms simply means she did not die immediately. Within days, Jane developed a fever. Her belly swelled, not with life this time, but with infection. This was puerperal fever, childbed fever, the same killer that stalked poor women in their straw-filled cottages. All the court physicians, all the prayers, all the wealth of the crown could not save her. She died on October 24th, less than 2 weeks after giving birth. Henry was devastated, not enough to abandon his quest for more wives, but enough to wear black for 3 months. To him, Jane's death was a personal tragedy. To history, it was a reminder. Even the Queen of England could be brought down by the same invisible killers that claimed 1 in 3 women of her time. Henry's first wife, Catherine of Aragon, endured 6 pregnancies in 9 years. 1510, stillborn daughter. 1511, son named Henry, dead after 52 days. 1513, stillborn son. 1514, stillborn son. 1516, daughter Mary, the only child to survive infancy. 1518, stillborn daughter. The repeated losses were blamed entirely on Catherine, not the medical ignorance, not the dangerous birthing practices, not Henry's own possible diseases, but Catherine herself. Court gossip labelled her cursed. The church framed it as divine punishment. Henry used her failure to produce a male heir as justification for divorce. Catherine, a devout Catholic, resisted with every ounce of her strength, but in the end she was set aside for Anne Boleyn. Her years of pain, grief and survival counted for nothing. Anne Boleyn, too, would learn that a royal womb is a political weapon, and a political liability. She gave birth to Elizabeth in 1533, but subsequent pregnancies ended in miscarriage or stillbirth. In January 1536, she miscarried a male fetus, around 15 weeks along. This loss sealed her fate. Henry, convinced she could not give him a son, turned his attention to Jane Seymour. Within months, Anne was arrested, tried for treason, and executed. The loss of a child, something that should have been met with grief and compassion, was instead treated as evidence of sin and crime. Catherine Parr outlived Henry VIII, which in itself was a feat. She remarried after his death, and in 1548 became pregnant at age 35, older than most Tudor first-time mothers, and already weakened by years of court life. She gave birth to a daughter, Mary, but within days she developed puerperal fever. Just like Jane Seymour, she died within a week. Her daughter would be orphaned and disappear from historical record. For queens and high-ranking noblewomen, childbirth was never private. It was a public performance designed to prove the legitimacy of the child. The birthing chamber would be crowded with witnesses, ladies in waiting, noblewomen, midwives, sometimes even physicians, and male courtiers. They were there to make sure the baby came from the Queen's body and no one else's. Imagine it, labouring for hours, screaming in pain, your legs spread while 20 pairs of eyes watch every movement. You are an object, not a person. Your agony is a political necessity. Being a queen could make childbirth more dangerous. Royal protocol dictated when the Queen entered confinement, how the chamber was prepared, who attended, and even the temperature of the room. All the same dangerous superstitions applied: sealed windows, roaring fires, stale air. But now the room was packed with even more bodies, raising the temperature and further fouling the air. The pressure to produce an heir also led to riskier pregnancies. Queens were expected to conceive again quickly after birth, even before their bodies had fully healed. Miscarriage, infection, and death were common results. The death of a queen in childbirth could shake a kingdom. When Jane Seymour died, England celebrated Edward's birth, but quietly feared the instability of losing another queen so soon. When Catherine Parr died, it left her infant daughter without protection, in a court full of dangerous politics. When queens failed to produce heirs, entire dynasties shifted. The lack of a male heir for Henry VIII led to the eventual accession of two of his daughters, and years of religious and political turmoil. In the end, the royal womb was no safer than the peasants'. Queens laboured in gilded chambers instead of dirt-floored cottages, but the fire still roared. The air still stank. The midwives' hands were just as unwashed. A title could buy you silk sheets, but not survival. Even now, centuries later, the ghosts of these royal mothers linger in the history books, reduced to footnotes about their children, their deaths framed as inevitable tragedies rather than preventable outcomes. They remind us that in the Tudor world, no woman, not even a queen, was safe from the birthing bed. In Tudor England, childbirth was a gamble you often lost, but even when the birth itself didn't kill you, the so-called remedies just might. The danger wasn't only in the birthing room, it was in the powders, potions, and rituals meant to save you. Many of them came from a place of hope, others from superstition, some from pure ignorance, and all too often they became just another way to die. One of the most prized items a pregnant woman could own was an eagle stone, a small hollow rock with a smaller stone rattling inside. They were tied around the belly with a ribbon or worn in a pouch against the skin. The belief? Eagle stones would make labour easier, prevent miscarriage, and protect both mother and child. The reality? They were rocks, smooth, comforting to hold maybe, but useless against hemorrhage, infection, or a baby stuck in the birth canal. Still, women paid fortunes for them, hoping magic could protect where medicine could not. Among the most unsettling remedies was the Virgin's Mantle, a powder made from moss that grew only on human skulls. The ideal skull was from an executed criminal, and the moss had to be scraped off in secret. It would then be dried, ground into powder, and mixed with wine. Pregnant women drank it to ease labour pains. Instead, they often swallowed a cocktail of decay and bacteria, introducing infection before the baby was even born. Some midwives believed that difficult labours were caused by blockages or cold in the womb, which could be driven out with heat and smoke. The mother would be made to sit over a brazier filled with burning herbs, rosemary, sage, and sometimes mercury, sulphur, lead, or arsenic. The smoke would rise into her body, carrying poison with it. These fumigations could cause dizziness, fainting, burns, and, of course, poisoning. The baby didn't fare much better. One of the most baffling and deadly practices was bloodletting during labour, even for women already hemorrhaging. The theory was simple. Bleeding would rebalance the humours, easing the pain and speeding delivery. The reality? It weakened the mother, lowered her ability to survive, and often sped up death instead. Some remedies were less lethal, but equally absurd. In one, the husband would be made to simulate labour in a nearby room, grunting and groaning in sympathy. It was thought that his sharing the pain would make the wife's labour easier, as though childbirth were a performance you could pass off to someone else. Of course, it did nothing for the mother, except maybe give her something to focus her rage on. Pennyroyal, tansy, savin. These plants were known to cause violent contractions. Midwives used them to speed labour, or to end pregnancies entirely. The problem was that the dosage between works and kills was razor thin. Too much and the uterus could rupture. The mother could bleed out internally in minutes. Many women died from the very herbs meant to save them. Sometimes rye bread carried a fungus called ergot. Women in labour were deliberately given ergot-laced mixtures to strengthen contractions. And it worked. Contractions became so strong, so fast that the baby and the mother could both be torn apart inside. Survivors could be left with gangrene, seizures, or hallucinations for life. Superstition bled into every birth. Knots were untied in the room, in hair, in clothing, in rope, to open the womb. Locks were unlocked, doors left ajar, windows cracked just enough to release the spirit of the birth. Charms were pinned to the bed or sewn into the mother's gown. Bits of bone, silver coins, scraps of scripture. Some were harmless. Others, like swallowing ground coral or powdered pearl, risked choking or poisoning the mother. Perhaps the most macabre of all was the belief that drinking a concoction made from human remains could restore health and strength. Ground mummy, imported from Egypt, was sold in apothecaries. Dried human blood was mixed with wine. Some believed powdered bone could harden the womb and prevent miscarriage. Each swallow carried the risk of disease, and for some, it was the last thing they ever tasted. The tragedy was that women trusted these remedies because they had nothing else. In a world where childbirth killed 1 in 3 mothers, you took whatever help you could find. If the midwife told you to drink skull moss, you drank it. If the physician told you to breathe smoke, you breathed. If the wise woman gave you pennyroyal tea, you swallowed it down, praying it would work, because the alternative was to do nothing, and nothing felt like inviting death. In Tudor England, hope was often deadly, and in the birthing room, the cure could be worse than the disease. Survival in Tudor childbirth is not the end of the story. It is the start of another battle, one fought with a broken body, a fractured mind, and a silence so deep it swallows the truth. When the bleeding stops, when the midwife leaves, when the gossips carry their news into the street, you are left alone with what childbirth has made of you. The wounds from labour do not always heal cleanly. A fistula, a hole torn between the birth canal and the bladder, or the rectum, can leave you leaking urine or faeces constantly. The smell follows you everywhere. Your clothes are always damp. You sleep on rags to protect the bed. Many women are abandoned by their husbands, hidden away like shameful secrets. Prolapse is another shadow of birth. The womb, bladder, or rectum can slip from its place, sometimes protruding visibly. Women push the bulge back in with their hands and tie cloth between their legs to hold it there. Walking becomes agony. Sex is impossible, but in Tudor law a husband's right outweighs a wife's pain. There is no word for pelvic floor here, no exercises, no rehabilitation. Once something falls or tears inside you, it stays that way until it kills you. Back pain is common from damaged muscles and torn ligaments. Pelvic pain becomes a permanent companion. Scar tissue from a deep tears pulls and burns with every movement. Infection can set in days or weeks later, a slow fever, an ache in the belly, swelling that grows tighter each day until the skin glistens with strain. Sometimes the infection bursts inward, flooding the body with poison. Sometimes it festers for years, flaring with every new pregnancy. Even simple tasks, carrying water, bending to stir the fire, become risks. One wrong movement, and a wound reopens, sending you back to bed. For those who nurse their own babies, the pain does not stop at the womb. Mastitis, an infection of the breast, turns feeding into torture. The skin grows red and hot. The milk turns thick, sometimes streaked with blood or pus. Abscesses form, swelling tight with fluid until they are lanced with a knife. There is no anaesthesia. Cracked nipples bleed into the baby's mouth. Sometimes the tissue is chewed away entirely, leaving the mother unable to feed at all. The body is not the only casualty. Postpartum depression, mother's melancholy, is dismissed as weakness. Women who cry, who withdraw, who speak of fear or sadness are told to pray harder, to be grateful for surviving, to stop being selfish. Puerperal psychosis, hallucinations, delusions, violent thoughts is treated as evidence of demonic possession. Women are restrained, beaten, starved, or subjected to exorcisms. Some are imprisoned in asylums. Many kill themselves rather than face another pregnancy. There is no language for trauma here, no understanding that the mind can be wounded as deeply as the flesh. Recovery is short-lived. In the eyes of the law, a wife's body belongs to her husband. Refusal is not permitted. Within weeks, sometimes days, you're back in the marriage bed, and the cycle begins again. A body still healing is forced to carry another pregnancy. Wounds tear open. Scars stretch and split. The danger multiplies with each birth. Women do not speak openly about what happens in the birthing chamber. The truth is too heavy, and fear is contagious. Mothers do not tell their daughters what to expect. They use vague phrases, "carry a woman's burden," "God will see you through," and leave the rest unsaid. The girl learns the truth only when it is too late to turn back. Even in private, the details are softened. Diaries record births as brought to bed of a son, or delivered of a daughter, hiding the agony in polite phrases. The deaths are marked as God's will, the maimings as ill luck. If you die in childbirth, your name might not even be recorded. Parish records list you as wife of or widow of, erasing you into the shadow of a man's name. Your age, your story, your suffering, gone. If your baby dies as well, there is even less chance anyone will remember. The two of you will vanish from history together. The truth survives only in whispers, a certain look passed between women in the market, a brief squeeze of the hand when a young bride passes by, a small shake of the head when a woman announces her pregnancy. There is a language here, invisible to men, a way of saying, "I know, I see you, I remember." The silence ensures the cycle continues. Each generation enters childbirth unprepared, shocked by the brutality and unable to warn the next. The physical damage is passed on in other ways too. Malnutrition, poor health, and repeated pregnancies weaken mothers, which weakens their children, especially their daughters, who will one day be mothers themselves. The suffering is not just personal, it's hereditary. You survived the birth. But in Tudor England, survival doesn't mean safety. It means you've bought yourself a little more time before the next battle, and sooner or later, the bloodroom will call you back. Childbirth in Tudor England was not just a physical ordeal, it was a spiritual one, a crossing point between the living and the dead. The birthing chamber was a place where the veil was said to be thinnest. Here, between a mother's first scream and her last breath, anything could step through. And many believed it did. Of all the spirits said to haunt the birthing bed, none was more feared than the White Lady. She appeared in different forms, a pale woman in a shroud, a shadow in the corner, a face in the firelight, but her meaning was always the same. If she stood at the foot of the bed, the mother would die. If she stood at the head, the baby would die. If she moved around the bed, both would be gone before morning. Women claimed to see her in the middle of the night, when the contractions grew too close together and the air was thick with the smell of blood. Some said she leaned in to whisper a name, the name of the one she'd take. Others said she simply watched, silent and still, until the moment came. Not every baby was believed to be what it seemed. If a newborn was too quiet, too still, or stared too intently, people whispered it was a changeling, a fairy or demon child left in place of the real baby who had been stolen away. The signs could be anything: hair too light, eyes too dark, a cry that sounded wrong. In some places, a child who failed to thrive was assumed to be a changeling, no matter what. The solution was cruel. Some families abandoned these infants in the woods, or left them exposed on a hillside. Others subjected them to tests meant to force the fairy to reveal itself, holding the baby over a fire, placing it on an anthill, or plunging it into cold water. Of course, these tests killed many human children who'd simply been born weak or ill. Midwives stood at the very heart of this world between worlds. They knew the herbs that could ease a birth, and the ones that could end a pregnancy. They could turn a breech baby, predict whether the mother would live or die, and sometimes, it was said, decide the outcome themselves. Such power made them targets. If too many women died under a midwife's care, she might be accused of witchcraft. If too many lived, she might be accused of making deals with the devil. Either way, suspicion was dangerous. During witch trials, midwives were often accused of cursing babies, swapping them for changelings, or killing them in the womb. They were stripped, searched for witch marks, and tortured until they confessed. Many were executed. With them died generations of accumulated knowledge about childbirth. To guard against spirits, curses, and bad luck, women and their attendants surrounded themselves with charms. Knives were placed under pillows to cut the pain. Keys were hung on strings around the neck to unlock the womb. All knots were untied, all doors and windows opened, not for air but to open the way for the baby. In some places, the husband's clothes were draped over the mother's body to confuse the spirits into thinking she was a man, making her too uninteresting to claim. Herbs like rosemary and rue were burned to purify the room. Psalms were whispered over bowls of water, which were then splashed in the corners to keep out evil. Every birthing chamber carried the memory of those who had laboured and died there before. Women claimed to hear babies crying when no child was present, to see figures standing in the corners where the shadows were deepest, to feel hands on their shoulders when no one was behind them. Some insisted that the smell of the dead never left, no matter how much straw was changed or how many herbs were burned. Not all superstition was about death. Sometimes a birth that went too well was seen as suspicious. If the labour was quick, if the pain was light, if the baby came without struggle, whispers began. Such things were unnatural. A woman who birthed easily might be accused of witchcraft. In some cases, she was thought to have made a pact, offering up something or someone in exchange for an easy delivery. History tells of women whose births were celebrated as miracles until they became evidence against them. Mary Howard in 1542 gave birth to healthy twin boys without difficulty. Instead of praise, she was accused of adultery because twins were considered unnatural. One twin died within a month, the other was given away. Mary herself was found drowned later that year. Elizabeth Barton, known as the Nun of Kent, gave birth after years of infertility. She claimed to have seen visions during labour, angels, saints, messages from God. For a time she was celebrated as a holy woman. But when her visions turned political, speaking against Henry VIII's divorce, she was hanged for treason. Some women said the ghosts of those who had died in childbirth stayed in the chamber to watch over or to warn the living. They appeared in the corners, pale and drawn, or hovered near the bed, their hands outstretched toward the labouring mother. Some were said to weep, others to smile sadly, as if they already knew the outcome. Whether these visions were real or the fevered hallucinations of women in agony, they were believed absolutely, and belief had power. Superstition shaped the choices made in the birthing room. A midwife might delay calling for a surgeon because she believed a spirit was testing her. A woman might refuse to change position because she feared it would invite the White Lady. A charm might be placed before a clean cloth because magic was trusted more than hygiene. In a world where so much of childbirth was beyond control, these rituals gave an illusion of power, even if they cost lives. The birthing room was not just a place of blood and screams. It was a crossroads where women stood with one foot in the world of the living and one in the world of the dead, surrounded by whispers, shadows, and eyes they could not always see. Childbirth in Tudor England was not just a life and death event. It was an industry. Every scream, every drop of blood, every body lowered into the ground, all of it was part of a machine that fed on women's suffering and turned it into profit. The midwife did not work for free. Her fee was set in advance and she was paid whether you lived or died. In fact, the longer she stayed and the more complicated the birth, the more she could charge. If you survived and the baby was healthy, she would expect a bonus. If the baby died but you lived, she would still be paid in full. If both died, well, she might still claim she'd done all she could, and the fee would stand. In some villages, midwives with good reputations, meaning only half their patients died instead of most, could charge 6 months' wages for a single birth. For poor women, this meant debt before the child was even born. Families sold possessions, pawned tools, or took loans they couldn't repay, all for the chance of surviving the bloodroom. The surgeon's work was more expensive and charged by the piece. Removing a dead baby whole was one fee. Cutting it into pieces first, extra. Each hook insertion, each limb removed, each special procedure, all itemised like a butcher's bill. And payment came first. If the family couldn't produce the money, the surgeon could, and sometimes did, pack up his tools and leave, even mid-procedure. Women died with the hook still inside them because their husbands couldn't pay. The church had its own way of making money from childbirth and from death. If you died without being churched, the purification ceremony for women after giving birth, your soul was considered unclean. You couldn't be buried in consecrated ground. The solution? Payment. Families could buy special prayers, blessings, and dispensations to get the mother into holy ground. The poorer the family, the deeper the debt. If the baby died unbaptized, the same rules applied. Priests charged for special masses to ease the soul's passage, even though doctrine claimed it was already too late. In towns, the death of a mother and child was a windfall for the coffin maker. Child-sized coffins were kept in stock, ready to sell. Some craftsmen even built double coffins, sized to hold both mother and baby in one burial. The demand was so high that many coffin makers kept connections with midwives and gossips who would send word when a birth was going badly. It gave them time to start building before the death was even official. If a mother died but the baby lived, the family needed a wet nurse immediately. This was expensive. Wealthy families hired reputable wet nurses, often from the countryside, paying them enough to feed their own families, at the cost of neglecting their own infants. Poorer women's babies often starved while they nursed the children of the rich. Some wet nurses deliberately let their own infants die, so they could take higher-paying positions feeding noble children. It was an open secret. In the birthing chamber, the gossips, female friends, neighbours and relatives weren't just there for support. They were information brokers. They carried stories from one birth to another, trading details about who screamed too much, whose husband was impotent, whose baby didn't look like the father. In a society where reputation could mean survival, this gossip had value and a price. Sometimes gossips were paid in food, drink, or favours to keep certain details quiet. Other times, they were bribed to spread them. Wise women and herbalists sold charms for fertility, then charms for safe pregnancy, then herbs to encourage labour, and if needed, herbs to end it. The same hands could profit at every stage, no matter the outcome. Some remedies worked, some didn't, but the exchange of money happened regardless, and for every woman they saved, there was another who died from a bad dose or a poisoned brew. If a mother died and the father couldn't afford a wet nurse, the baby might be sent to a baby farm, a household that took in infants for a fee. In theory, the farmer cared for the child until it was weaned. In practice, many simply pocketed the money and let the babies die of neglect, feeding them watered-down milk or nothing at all. The mortality rate was staggering, sometimes close to 90%, but desperate families still sent their children because the alternative was starving in their own arms. Astrologers charged to determine the best time for conception or birth. Fortune tellers sold predictions of the baby's sex. Pilgrimages were made to shrines, with coins left behind for saints who specialised in safe delivery. The church sold relics, splinters of the true cross, bits of saints' bones, at enormous prices, claiming they could protect mother and child. Even holy water, blessed for the occasion, was marked up 1,000%. Everyone involved had a reason to keep the system going. Midwives needed births to stay dangerous, so their skills stayed in demand. Surgeons profited from emergencies. The church profited from both survival and death. The coffin maker profited from failure. The woman giving birth was the only one with something to lose, and she lost everything. Childbirth wasn't just a risk, it was an economy, and the only ones paying the real price were the women who bled on the bed. In Tudor England, childbirth was not just a private event. It could decide the fate of a kingdom. No man understood this more than Henry VIII, and no woman suffered more for it than his queens. When Henry came to the throne in 1509, he was young, strong, and married to Catherine of Aragon. The match was a political triumph, uniting England and Spain, and everyone expected a string of healthy princes to follow. But Catherine's first pregnancy ended in a stillbirth. Her second brought a son, Prince Henry, who died after just 7 weeks. A third pregnancy ended in another stillbirth. A fourth finally gave them a child who lived, Princess Mary. But she was a girl. To Henry, this was a failure. A king's legacy was carried by sons. Daughters were pawns to be married off. Sons were weapons to hold the throne. In the Tudor court, a queen's womb was not her own. It was a national resource, a political tool. When a queen was pregnant, the court swirled with speculation. Who would stand godparent? Which foreign power would seek an alliance? Which noble family's fortunes would rise or fall depending on the child's sex? But behind the scenes, the stakes were cruelly personal. If the queen failed to produce a healthy son, her marriage, and sometimes her life, was in danger. By the mid-1520s, Catherine was in her 40s. Years of repeated pregnancies, miscarriages, and stillbirths had taken their toll. She was frail, her figure gone, her hair streaked with grey. The court whispered that she was past childbearing. For Henry, this was unacceptable. His line, the Tudor dynasty, was only 1 generation removed from a bloody civil war. Without a son, the kingdom could be thrown into chaos after his death. So he began looking for a way out. Anne Boleyn was young, sharp-witted, and politically ambitious. Unlike Catherine, she had not yet been worn down by years of childbirth. Henry became obsessed. But there was a problem. He was still married to Catherine, and the Catholic Church forbade divorce. Henry's great matter became not just a question of love or lust, but of succession and power. He argued that his marriage to Catherine was cursed because she had been his brother's widow, citing a biblical passage that claimed such unions would be childless. The Pope refused to annul the marriage. Henry broke with Rome, declaring himself the head of the Church of England, all to marry Anne Boleyn and try again for a son. Anne knew her worth depended entirely on giving Henry a male heir. When she became pregnant in 1533, the court braced for the announcement of a prince. Instead, she delivered a daughter, Elizabeth. The disappointment was sharp, but Henry held on, believing a son would come next. Anne's second pregnancy ended in miscarriage. The third brought a stillborn boy. The pressure was relentless. Every loss was not just a personal tragedy, it was a political disaster. By 1536, Anne's enemies were circling, and Henry was already eyeing Jane Seymour. Anne was arrested, accused of adultery and treason, and executed. Her body was barely cold before Henry married Jane. Jane's first pregnancy was everything Henry had wanted. In 1537, she gave birth to a son, Edward. Bells rang across England, feasts were held, and Jane was celebrated as the saviour of the Tudor line. 12 days later, she was dead. The official cause was childbed fever, infection brought on by the unwashed hands and instruments of those attending her. Henry wore black for months, declaring her his true wife. But the truth was simple. Jane had given him a son, and in doing so, she had given her life. Edward was a sickly child. Every cough, every fever, sent ripples of panic through the court. The boy who had cost his mother's life was the single thread holding the Tudor succession together. This made Henry's later marriages less about love and more about security. A second son would have been an insurance policy, one he never got. For the queens, childbirth was a weapon aimed at their own throats. Success meant survival, failure meant ruin. Catherine of Aragon died alone after being cast aside. Anne Boleyn died by the sword. Jane Seymour died in a blood-soaked bed. Anne of Cleves escaped only because her marriage was annulled before she could be forced into the birthing chamber. Catherine Howard was executed before she could conceive. Catherine Parr narrowly survived both childbirth and Henry himself. Henry's obsession with a male heir reshaped England forever. It broke the country from the Catholic Church, triggered decades of religious conflict, and turned the royal bedchamber into a battlefield. The irony: when Henry died in 1547, his fragile son Edward reigned for just 6 years. The throne passed not to another man, but to 2 of his daughters, Mary and Elizabeth, who ruled longer, and in Elizabeth's case more successfully, than any Tudor king. The great matter had cost lives, faith and stability, and in the end it proved that the most dangerous place for a Tudor queen was not the executioner's block, but the birthing bed. The birthing room in Tudor England was never just a room. It was a stage, a battlefield, a grave. It was where life began, and too often where it ended. For centuries its walls absorbed the screams of mothers, and the first and last cries of their children. The straw beneath the bed was soaked with blood, the air heavy with heat and fear, the door guarded by superstition and silence. We will never know how many women died here. Parish records were incomplete. Deaths were softened with phrases like "taken by God" or "delivered into his hands." Many were not recorded at all, especially the poor, the unmarried, or those whose babies died with them. Estimates suggest that 1 in 3 women might die in childbirth over the course of her life, but these numbers cannot capture the truth. The women who lived but never healed, the ones whose bodies were broken, whose minds were shattered, whose names disappeared. Survival did not mean freedom. It meant getting up, torn and bleeding, to feed the fire and the husband who would climb into your bed again. It meant carrying the weight of new pregnancies before the scars of the last one had closed. It meant knowing that the next time you entered the bloodroom, you might not walk out. No one spoke openly of the dangers. To speak them aloud was to invite them in. So the truth was passed in glances, in the grip of a hand, in the brief pause before saying, "You'll be fine." The daughters of survivors entered the room blind, just as their mothers had, and the wheel turned again. In the great halls of power, kings and councillors made laws about marriage, succession, and inheritance, all of which depended on women surviving childbirth long enough to produce heirs. Queens were crowned knowing they would be judged not by their wisdom, but by their wombs. The court celebrated the birth of a prince with feasts, processions, and gun salutes. The death of the mother was quietly moved to the back pages of the chronicle, a tragic footnote to the real story. The bloodroom had its own afterlife. Whispers told of figures that stood at the foot of the bed, of unseen hands brushing across the cheek, of lullabies sung in empty rooms. Some swore they could still smell the iron tang of blood long after the chamber had been scrubbed and aired. Whether these ghosts were real or born from the fever dreams of grief, they were part of the room's history, and history remembers, even when people do not. The bloodroom as the Tudors knew it began to fade in the centuries that followed. Advances in medical knowledge, slow, stubborn, and often resisted, eventually made childbirth less lethal. The rise of man midwives, the spread of forceps, the understanding of infection, and the importance of clean hands, all chipped away at the death toll. But these changes came too late for the women of Tudor England. They had already paid in blood. So why remember this? Why walk back into the bloodroom when we can leave it behind. Because the silence that killed Tudor women is not so different from the silences that exist today. Because childbirth, even now, is not safe everywhere. Because the idea that a woman's worth lies in her ability to bear children still lingers in law, culture, and expectation. And because those women, the ones whose names we do not know, deserve more than to be erased into polite euphemism. They deserve to be remembered in full. Their screams, their courage, their blood. Picture it. A narrow Tudor chamber, lit by a single candle. A bed pushed against the wall, straw underfoot, the sheets damp with sweat. A woman's hand gripping the edge of the mattress, so hard her knuckles shine white. At her feet, a midwife works in the dim light. At her head, a shadow waits in the corner, silent, patient, and certain. The bloodroom does not care for titles or riches or prayers. It only cares for the price that must be paid. And in Tudor England, the price of life was often death.